All right, I want to welcome everyone to the Iowa Senior Corps CSO Chat for January. This is the January 9th, excuse me, CSO Chat. I'm going to apologize right now. Am still recovering from a cold, and so please excuse my coughing and water breaks throughout today's presentation. Today's topic is progress reports, or PPRs, and how to report the impact of your program. Today we're going to be taking a look at the program progress reports. As I said, my name is Jancy LaFollette from CNCS, the Iowa State office, and I'll be your presenter slash facilitator for today's call. The PowerPoint will be available at the end of the session, and the session is being recorded. So if you object, you may disconnect now. Our CSO chats are designed to highlight a topic and provide a forum for discussion. They are not intended to be an all-encompassing aspect of what we're discussing. So please make sure you read instructions, specifically the PPR instructions, in full to get full insight. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. All the lines are currently open, so please make sure you're muting your line. If you joined us via your phone and you do not have a mute button, *6 will mute and unmute your line. If you joined us via your computer today, and you're listening to me through your computer speakers, there is a radial button at the bottom of your screen that will mute your line as well. It looks like a little microphone, and if you just click on that, it will mute your line. So wanted to make sure that folks are aware of that. If you did join us via your telephone today, please do not place us on hold, as we will likely hear hold music, which can be distracting and pretty hard to talk over. So just wanted to make sure folks are aware. We will have time throughout for questions. However, feel free to use the chat functionality on the link system if you do have any questions throughout. So just wanted to make sure that folks are aware that we do have that chat functionality as well. So just a few housekeeping things that I wanted to cover before we started. So today's agenda, we're going to review the Program Progress Report, or PPR, resources. We're going to do a quick overview of the Program Progress Report, as well as talk about the importance of reading the instructions, highlighting a few things, and then talk a little bit more about impact statements and what we mean by impact statements, and really being able to articulate that in your PPRs, as well as any information that you might be sending to the state office outside of your PPR. So that is our agenda for today. Before we kind of dive into things, is there any questions that anyone has so far just about the system and making sure that everyone can hear me? Any questions yet so far before we kind of start diving into the full agenda for today?
Jancy?
Yes, Sheila.
Okay. This doesn't have to do with the system. It has to do with the PPR format. Are you talking about the new format, or which form, or doesn't it matter?
The PPR, so everyone should be on the same progress report now. So the PPR, we're going to talk about the light and the annual one, then the differentiations between those. But everyone should be on this kind of the same reporting system. It should all look pretty similar to everybody at this point.
That's my question. If it looked different, because some of us, the first year that has that. Gone through that.
Right. Everyone has gone through recompetition at this point, and so everyone has been brought up to this PPR that we're going to be discussing today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Good clarifying question, though. Any other questions for folks? All right. So first and foremost, I want to talk about PPR resources. I'm a big believer, and I don't have to know everything, but I sure as heck need to know where to find the answers to things. So these are three main resources for you guys to utilize while you're reviewing your PPR, or while you're developing and reporting out on your PPR. So the first is the Managing Senior Corps landing page. I'm sure you guys have heard about this a lot. This is through the nationalservice.gov website, and it's really kind of a landing page for all Senior Corps resources. So I want to make sure that folks are aware of that. The next is the PPR instructions itself. The link to that can be found on the landing page, but right there is the PPR instructions, which would have come out through the emails that I've sent. I did send a reminder about the PPRs. A few of you, actually almost all of you, have some that are due coming up here shortly, and so that is on there. Oop, looks like we're having an echo. I want to make sure that folks have placed me on mute, so if you did join via email, or not via email, I'm so sorry, via your computer or via your phone, please make sure you've placed me on mute. If you join via your phone, *6 will mute and unmute your line. If you join via your computer, if you clicked the radio button at the bottom of your screen, that will mute your line. So I just want to make sure that folks are muting me so we don't get that echo. Cliff, is this any better? Great, awesome. All right, so I just wanted to make sure that folks are aware of these resources. These are great aspects to turn back to. Because we don't do PPRs every day, these are some great resources to kind of do some revisions for. So the next one that I want to talk about a little bit is the Senior Corps performance measurements. As you guys know, your PPR includes different components, but the performance measures section is a big component of your PPR, and a nice refresher course sometimes is needed, so we remember what those performance measures are, and what the definitions of those mean. Again, we don't deal with these every day, so it's always nice to kind of revisit some of these resources that are out there. So the Senior Corps performance measurements are available again through the National Service website, and this is really through the Resource Center. There are some links from the landing page as well, but I just wanted to make sure that folks are aware that the landing page, the PPR instructions, and the performance measurements are going to be your top 3 resources when compiling your progress report. So just making sure that folks are aware of those. Again, I'm going to apologize for my coughing. Please bear with me. So we're going to talk a little bit about the PPR and do a quick overview of the PPR, and making sure that folks understand what the PPR is and what we utilize it for. So I apologize for the acronym that I keep using, but the progress report, the program progress report, or the PPR, these are all the same thing. So I use them interchangeably, and I'm going to apologize for that. So the project progress report, or PPR, and the project progress report Lite, or the PPR Lite, are used to ensure that grantees of our Senior Corps programs, which is RSVP, foster grandparents, and senior companions, address and fulfill the legislated program purpose, meet agency program management and grant requirements, track and measure progress to benefit the local project and its contributions to the senior volunteers and the community, and to report progress towards the work plan objectives agreed upon in the granting of the award. A lot of times when people get to the PPR for the first time, they're like, Jancy, where did these performance measurements come from? Who did these? You did. You presented those in your grant application. We did not change them, I promise. And so that is where those objectives come from. The PPR and the PPR Lite will be used to report progress towards accomplishments in the work plans, the goals, the objectives, reporting volunteers and service outputs, reporting actual outcomes related to self-nominated performance measurements, and meeting challenges encountered, describing significant activities, and requesting technical assistance. So the PPR has a lot of uses that we use it for. The performance measurements is probably going to be the main one, but we're going to go over the different aspects. Program directors must complete the PPR and the PPR Lite electronically via our CNCS web-based application system, or eGrants is currently the system that we use. Many of you know CNCS will be updating their platform that they're going to be using. eGrants is still currently our platform that we use for the progress reports, the PPR Lite and the PPR Annual. So I want to make sure that folks are aware that eGrants is still the platform, or understand that eGrants is still the platform. If you have questions regarding the completion of your PPR that have not been addressed in the instructions, so again, make sure you're reading those PPR instructions, please contact your designated program officer. That may not be me, that may be Vicki or myself. Again, our office has 2 people. So if you guys do have questions as you're trying to go through that PPR, please make sure you contact your designated program officer for clarification. So that was just a quick overview of the PPR, making sure that folks understand kind of, we use it for a lot of different aspects, and we wanted to make sure that folks realize that and utilize it to its fullest potential. So any questions about what the PPR is or why we ask programs to do it? Again, you can always chat questions, or you can always put questions in the chat functionality of the link system today. If you think of them, we will pause for questions throughout. But if you do have any questions, I'll pause for just a few more seconds and take a sip of water. If anybody has any questions about the PPR itself. Okay. So, accessing the PPR. Really, where are you going to find this thing? So after logging into eGrants, you're going to access the PPR, or the progress report, from the eGrants home screen by clicking on Progress Report. If you see in the lower right hand side of this screen, so this screen should look like what your home screen looks like on eGrants, and you can see at the bottom right hand side, this is your reporting to CNCS. So this is the financial reports, or the eGrants FFR, the program progress report, and then the progress report supplemental. So that's where you're going to find the actual PPR. A list of previous and current CNCS grants awarded will be listed. So click on your current grant number to see the progress report available for your current award. So please be aware of that. For those of you who might have multiple multiple grants from CNCS, so AmeriCorps Vista or AmeriCorps State from your program sponsor, you might see different reports on there. We want to make sure that folks are clicking on the right one. After you click on the grant number, a list will display of the progress reports available for you for that award. The status of the progress report grantee entry, initial entry, indicates that the report has not been submitted to CNCS. So again, that's progress report initial entry basically means that it has not been submitted to us and is available for you to enter information. You're going to review the reporting date and the due date to help select the correct report. So again, you're going to have multiple reports in there. Make sure you're checking the reporting date and the due date so you're accessing the correct one. You're going to click edit to begin working on that report. So once you figure it out, it's pretty simple to get into. You can save and come back to it. You'll come back through it through the same means that you got to it the first time. So again, that reporting to CNCS section and that progress report link is where you're going to find the progress report itself. So I know we have some new folks who might not have done a PPR before, and we just want to make sure that folks understand where everything is. Any questions about how to access the report itself? Okay, so PPR Lite versus PPR Annual. So the Progress Report Lite is a semi-annual, or the Progress Report Lite semi-annual, or referred to as the PPR Lite, is submitted to report the outputs for the first 6 months of each grant year. Then the Progress Report Annual is the full report submitted at the end of each grant year, or your 12-month period. Information reported should reflect activities for the full 12 months reporting period. Outputs reported should be cumulative to include the outputs reported in the Progress Report Lite semi-annual. So Progress Report Lite is submitted to report on outputs for the first 6 months. Pages 4 through 11 of the instructions, so for those of you who have printed off the instructions and have those in front of you, the PPR Lite instructions are on pages 4 through 11, and it does walk you through screenshots as well as instructions as how to submit that PPR Lite. The Progress Report Annual is that full report submitted at the end of each grant year. Again, that's a full 12 months It's cumulative, so it should include what was reported on the progress report light. Pages 12 through 24 of the instructions will walk you through that PPR annual. So we want to make sure, again, folks are looking at those instructions, making sure they know where to access them at. The instructions to me are a little confusing because it has screenshots and some descriptions and tips, and so it can get a little overwhelming. But just make sure that you're paying attention to it. Take your time, read it over once before you actually get into eGrants. It helps to understand. So any questions about what the PPR Lite is versus the PPR Annual, because they're two different reports and they do ask for different things. We'll go over that in a second. But I just wanted to make sure that folks understood that the Lite is the first 6 months, the Annual is the full 12 months. Any questions about those? For most of you, not all of you, but for most of you on the call today, you do have a PPR Lite coming up, and that will be for the reporting period for those of you who have a 7/1 start date, so who started on, your current grant started on July 1st. Your first 6 months, which ended on December 31st, those reports will be due January 29th of 2017. So we want to make sure that folks are aware that that PPR Lite is coming up. And this is just an overview of what that will consist of. So just making sure that folks are aware of that. So the PPR components, we're going to spend some time looking at these, basically going over these. You're going to listen to me talk, not necessarily looking at them. But again, the instructions are going to be the great place to look at those instructions and get more information. So the PPR components really consist of the different tabs along the PPR. First, we're going to start with general information. The general information section includes various pieces of information about the PPR and the grant. At the bottom of the General Information tab, you will see a list of all the PPRs that have previously been submitted for this grant number. For those of you who are in year 1, you won't see any. For those of you who are in year 2 or 3, you'll see all of your previous PPRs that have been submitted for this grant number. You can click on any of those PPRs in the list and go directly to a PDF of that PPR. So if you want to look at what you reported previously, you most certainly can look at that. Page 5 of the instructions will walk you through how to do that. Again, page 5 of the instructions. From those PPRs, you can also look at the previous notes that were submitted. So when Vicki and I review your program progress reports, we do provide notes. Everything is provided in eGrants now and held there. For those of you who've been around for a while, we used to give you an email that said what it was, and you had to go back and try to find that email. It's now all held in eGrants, so if you ever want to go back and say, oh, Jancy gave me a suggestion for improvement for next time, what was that? You can go back to the PPR and look at the notes, and we'll go over where you can find those. But all of those are, again, held at the bottom of the General Information tab, and they pull up in a PDF. So that's really the first tab. Some of that information pulls forward from your application, so some of it you can't really edit, but just make sure you're reviewing it and make sure it makes sense. The demographics tab is available for FGP and SCP only. So the demographics tab, my RSVP projects or our RSVP projects are not going to see the demographics tab. The information entered in this section should be identical to the information entered on the eGrants FFR. Keep that in mind. Note, when entering numbers on the screen, you're going to want to use whole numbers and not decimals or commas. So a lot of times folks get some errors that pop up on the demographics tab, and you are going to want to make sure that you, again, using whole numbers and no commas. Page 6 of the instructions are going to walk you through the demographics tab and what needs to be included on there. Again, I'm going to reiterate that the information submitted here also needs to be the same as the information submitted on your eGrants FFR. So the eGrants FFR, those information we cross-check those, so please make sure those numbers are matching. The next tab you're going to see on the progress report is the progress report tab. The progress report tab is where you enter your progress on achieving your performance measures, output targets that were planned in your application. So this is where you're going to report outputs and outcomes from your application. You will use this screen to enter the actual outputs, the outcomes, the unduplicated number of volunteers, the total number of volunteers, and the volunteer stations for each work plan. So this is a pretty important tab I want folks to pay attention to. If you're not sure what I mean by unduplicated volunteers, excuse me, page 7 of the application instructions will walk you through that. You can also find links in the resources from the first one of the first slides that I show you to describe what unduplicated volunteers mean versus total volunteers. That always seems and continues to be a question. We're not going to go into definitions today. This is really kind of high level stuff, but I wanted to make sure that folks understood that there is a difference between your actual number of unduplicated volunteer and your actual total number of volunteers. Sometimes those numbers are different, so please make sure you're aware of that. In this section, do not make up numbers. I will repeat that one more time. Do not make up numbers. You will need to have documentation to support any information you report in the PPR Lite or the PPR Annual. I want to make sure that folks understand that if you report that we tutored 140 students, you need to be able to have documentation to show where that came from, where that number came from. Please do not make up numbers. That is not encouraged because these are federal resources, and your federal resources do have to have documentation about where your numbers came from. There are two main sections of the Progress Report tab. There is a Progress Summary and a Performance Measure Progress. Again, you're going to enter whole numbers and not percentages in these sections. The numbers you report should reflect your accomplishments during the reporting period. So please be aware that this is for the accomplishments during the reporting period. The vast majority of our programs start on July 1st and run through 6/30. As I said earlier, we have a few that don't, but for the vast majority of you, you do. And so just make sure you're paying attention to the reporting period and the data that you have collected for that reporting period. For those of you who will be coming up on your Progress Report Lite, outcomes are not required for the Progress Report Lite. So just keep that in mind because outcomes typically come after 12 months. However, for some of you, because of where the reporting starts and ends, you report out your outputs or your outcomes, sorry. Didn't mean to distinguish between those two. Your outcomes in this report. So I just want to make sure that folks understand that you're making sure that you're reporting for the correct period. Some folks, because of when those activities end, they don't have any outcomes at this point, but some have outcomes because of when they ended. So the instructions say they are not required, but I want to make sure that folks understand that if they were reported during that reporting period, you can include them in the PPR Lite and just carry them forward to the annual. So any questions yet so far about what we've talked about? We're not done with this slide, but I need to take a water break. Hearing none, seeing none. I'm going to move on. So when entering unduplicated volunteers, keep in mind that each volunteer can only be reported in one work plan. For the total number of volunteers contributing, report every volunteer who served in the work plan. Actual outputs entered should reflect the work of all Senior Corps volunteers contributing to that work plan. So again, I want to make sure that folks are aware of that your unduplicated volunteers can only be reported in one work plan. The total number of volunteers report every volunteer who served on that work plan in that number. So just making sure folks understand the differentiation between those two. To provide any additional information for your work plan, you should provide it in the grantee note section. So that grantee note section is a great place to explain stuff. For instance, if your targets are not on track to be achieved, please provide an explanation. If the data collection varied from the original plan described in the instrument description field, explain the variance. If the target is blown out of the water, our target was to, tutor 100 children and we tutored 300 kids. provide an explanation about why that occurred. An explanation is not, we exceeded our target. That is not an explanation. That is you telling me what I'm reading. So please make sure that you're providing an explanation about why your target was 100 children to be tutored and you're reporting 300. That's great. Not saying it's not great, but you need to tell me why that happened. Same goes if there was a variance in the targets not being met. I understand the target's not being met. I can read the report too. Tell me why. There's a lot of reasons for that. Only you guys can tell me what's happening in your community. So this is where you're going to report that. Again, it's that grantee note section. This is where you can actually type in that field directly, and you can give us an explanation for stuff. So we want to make sure that folks are utilizing that grantee note section, and you understand that you can tell us your story a little bit more in depth there. So for my RSVP projects, everybody paying attention, RSVP folks? If you are reporting on the RSVP measure, the OT1, or the other community priority, the target should be 1. To report the actual for the output, you enter 1 for yes, we met the target you set for your project, or 0 for no if you did not meet the target set for your project. So just keep that in mind. For that RSVP measure, OT1, or other community priority, if you enter 1 in the output, that means that yes, you have met the target, and that's the target you set, or 0 means no, you did not meet that. Again, in the grantee no section, you can provide additional information. The number of unduplicated volunteers, total volunteers, and volunteer stations should be reported the same way you report on the other work plans for that OT1 work plan. That one's just a little different for our RSVP programs because that's that other community priority one. So again, 1 is met, 0 is not met. Keep that in mind.
Jency?
Yes.
My experience is that and this is Kathy Barloon,
Hi,
the
Kathy.
eGrants program, I will not let you actually put anything else in there besides a 0 that's already there. Has anybody else experienced that?
I am not aware of others experiencing that, Kathy, and it might be eGrants might be a little quirky. I know you're all going to chuckle at that. eGrants is a little quirky. It might be that you can't actually reach it until your 3rd year. The instructions don't say that, but eGrants might have been set up that way. I honestly do not know the answer to that, but I will check on it for you to see if I can get any better clarification.
Okay, I know I tried last year to put something in and it wouldn't do it. And so when I was working on my light this year, I tried, and it still wouldn't do anything for me.
Okay.
Kathy, this is Denise. I had that issue last year with my PPR also.
Okay, and so now you're in what year?
I'm in the same as you, 3rd year.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, I will check on that for you guys.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Any questions about the progress report tab before we kind of move on to the narratives? That's a good question. Thank you. Okay, so the narratives are going to be completed on the progress report annual only. So the progress report light does not have narratives attached to it. The narratives are going to be on the annual only. So there are 6 narratives to complete. You're going to complete each narrative with information about your activities during the reporting period. Narratives include challenges, partnerships and collaboration, partnerships/collaboration development, non-federal share development, other accomplishments, stories, and then a list of additional documents sent to CNCS State Office. So please keep in mind that documents, you cannot upload those currently in eGrants. With the new system, you will, or they're telling us you will be able to, but currently right now you cannot upload those in the eGrant. So if you do want to send any additional documents, they do need to be sent to the CNCS State Office. We do encourage you to we highly encourage you to send those electronically to your program officer because we need to then download them into eGrants. So label each attachment with the name of the document and your program name. and do them as separate documents unless they're the same thing. And each document you send will need to be, again, uploaded into eGrants. So just be mindful of that. We always get questions about what should be included in the attached documents. Basically, if it's something, a news article that you wanted to share with us, if it's a great story that was presented, those things are what should be included in that. Those are great resources. So basically, if you want it permanently attached to your report and it paints a great picture of what's going on in your project, include it. Again, we highly encourage electronic copies, making sure that you actually label those attachments so we know what they are once we go to download them. So keep that in mind. In the narrative sections, we do encourage you guys to take the time to tell us your story. Take the time to tell us about the challenges that you've experienced. If there are partnerships that you're developing or in the process of developing, let us know if there's any plans in there. If there's technical assistance needs that you need, let us know in the challenges section. The non-federal share development, again, keep us posted on what's kind of happening. Other accomplishment stories, those are great opportunities to, it wasn't included in the PPR and the performance measurement tab, or the progress report tab, sorry. It wasn't included in the progress report tab, but we wanted to tell you about this great thing that we're doing. Please tell us in the narrative. That's a great place for us to really get a better picture of what you guys are doing beyond if we actually tutored, our 140 kids like we said we were going to or not, but what the impact of that is. So feel free to spend some time on those narratives. Be concise, but be detailed. I know those kind of go against each other, but be detailed in letting us know what some details are about that great accomplishment, but at the same time, we don't need 40 pages on it. So concise and detailed at the same time. So the narratives piece of the instructions are going to give you more detail about what to include in each of those. Excuse me. So please refer back to that. Any questions about the narrative section for the progress report annual? Again, most of you won't be doing this right now, but this is definitely something to keep in mind as you move kind of through your PPRs, and maybe keeping some keeping some information to report out at the end of the 12 months. So just make a folder for it. Sometimes it's the best thing. Page 15 of the application instructions is where they start the PPR narrative tabs and the descriptions about what to report. So any questions about the narrative sections? Okay. Hearing none, I will move on. So the Veterans tab, if you do not have any data about veterans and military families, if you have data about veterans and military families, report it on the Veterans tab. If you do not have that information, simply enter 0 in each of those fields. So many projects have veterans information available for some work plans, but not for others. So CNCS asks that you report on veterans and military families data when you have that information available. Pages 20 through 24 of the instructions provide more information about this. Again, I'm going to ensure that you guys are not making up numbers. We want to make sure that this information is able to track back, and that you have tools to show of how you've tracked that information. So again, I don't want you to make up, we think we have, 2 veterans that we're serving, but we're not really sure. We never really asked them, but we'll put it down. Don't make up numbers. Make sure that you have supporting documentation for that. So, Sheila, it looks like you have a question on the chat. Maybe? Sheila, did you want to ask a question? So Cliff asks the question, is it necessary to document with anything more than self-checkbox by the volunteer? We have an optional section to disclose veteran status. Cliff, that is great. No, you don't need to do any more about that. The veteran section has a few additional information, things that they ask about military families and things like that. So you definitely want to make sure that you keep that self checkbox to be able to verify that information. So that should be helpful. Kayla says that the sound is cutting out. I'm going to encourage folks again to place us on mute so we don't hear the background information. I'm so sorry. The background noise that might help with some of the clicking in the background and the sound cutting out. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Sheila asked, are we to only put additional information in the annual PPR, not the light? So for what aspect, Sheila, are you talking about? Are you talking about outcomes? Or are you talking about, because narratives, the narrative sections are not in the PPR annual, so you're not going to put any information, those sections won't be available to you, but the grantee note sections will allow you to explain the measures. The progress report tab will allow you to explain some of the measures in there. So I hope that helps a little bit. No, I cannot hear you, Sheila. I'm sorry. Hopefully that helped.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you
Can you
now.
hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. And then I cut you off. I had to recall in.
Oh.
So whatever you just said before, I'm sorry. I didn't hear it.
Okay, so what I said is, your question was, are we to only put additional information in the annual PPR, not the light? With the narrative sections, you're not going to see the narratives in there, so there won't be any additional information to put. But for the progress report tabs, if there is any additional information that you want to add to that, to each of those performance measurements, you can. When we get to the summary tab, there is a place to put, I think it says the overall grantee notes. That's where you can provide additional information for that section. So the narratives and the veterans tabs are only going to be on the annual report, but the PPR Lite, there is going to be some sections to provide additional information if you need to. It's as applicable for those.
Okay, great.
Does that
Thank
help?
you.
Okay.
You bet.
Yeah. Kayla, is the sound any better? Good. Okay, just wanted to make sure. So the final tab that we have is the summary/staff review tab. So this is the final tab of the PPR. As you look at it, there's going to be tabs across the top that you'll click on, that you can go kind of click through, or you can just hit next to go to the next one. I do encourage folks to save often in eGrants. eGrants can be a little testy, is my best word to describe her. We do encourage folks to use Microsoft Explorer. That's the best web browser to use for eGrants. And making sure that you turn off your pop-up blockers. So the two things to make eGrants run as smoothly as it can is to make sure that you have Internet Explorer and to make sure that your pop-up blockers are turned off. So I just wanted to make sure that folks are aware of that. The Summary/Staff Review tab provides the summary of your PPR. From this screen, you can print your PPR summary, review your project's progress, enter notes to your program officer, and then you'll also be able to review comments that your program officer provides to you in their review of your PPR. So that's where you're going to find it, is on that that summary/staff review. At the bottom of the performance measures progress summary section, the performance measures progress summary section, you can enter in any additional comments on the overall grantee notes comment box. So that is a place to enter any additional information that you wanted us to know. If you click on the print complete note history, again, print complete note history, you can print all the notes you entered in the progress report tab. By clicking the print PPR summary, you can print the full work plan reports. Notes are not part of the full work plan report, so just make sure that you understand there's a differentiation between those. If you wanted to see our notes, again, that print complete note history, once we review it and you get that automatic notification from us saying that your PPR has been reviewed, that's where you're going to see our notes, is in that print complete note history kind of radial button that you can click. So these are the components of the PPR. Are there any questions about kind of what this is? We do encourage folks, again, to read the instructions. I did try to point out some pages for folks to reference back to. But any questions about the PPR components at this juncture? Okay. The next is just my little plug to read the instructions. Please, please, please read the instructions. There's a link to the instructions on the page. A few things to highlight, or the top 3 most common reasons your PPR might be returned for clarification. So again, these are the top 3 most common reasons your PPR might be returned for clarification. The first, if your demographics tab, if your information does not align with the information submitted in your FFR. So if the PPR information and the FFR information do not jive, we most likely might be returning that PPR to you. Next is if in the narrative sections. If the narratives include limited or no information, we might be returning it for additional information from you to get a better idea of what's happening with your project. Again, we encourage you to read the instructions for each of the sections. Pages 15 through 17 will give you what we're looking for in those sections. So again, narratives, if you have limited or no information, it might be returned to you. And third is the progress, probably should be number 1, but I went in the order of the PPR. If the progress report, in the progress report tab, if the performance measures progress, Progress Reports tab, the performance measures progress, that section. If the targets are not on track to be achieved and you did not provide an explanation, we might return it to you. Again, not just a vague observation that the target was not met, but an explanation of why the target was not met. If the target, again, is blown out of the water or being overachieved, we also are looking for an explanation as to how such success was possible. What have been the keys to your success? So we gauge this and get ideas for other projects, other programs. When Senior Corps Headquarters ask us about this, we can address it. And so that's what we look for. So in the Progress Report tab, in the Performance Measures Progress, if you are kind of something's, you're meeting your target, or you're not meeting your target, or you're blowing that target out of the water, make sure you're giving us some information in that grantee note section. It really does help us kind of solidify that information that you're submitting there. So those are kind of the top 3 reasons. There's other reasons, but those are the top 3 reasons that your PPR might be returned. So again, read the instructions. I know that sounds so simple, but that is my biggest tip for you guys to have a successful PPR. The next, we're going to talk a little bit about impact statements. So impact statements are something that we are always looking for. We're always looking for how we're demonstrating our work is making a difference. So impact statements really demonstrate how our work makes a difference in the lives of people, communities, and the environment. And ask the question, so what and who cares? And I know you've heard Vicki say this before. We tutored 140 kids. Okay, so what? Why is that important? So this is an opportunity. We want folks to kind of start looking at their progress reports and making sure that you can see the difference that you're making and you're articulating that in your progress report. So why are we looking at progress reports? Basically, we are looking for a brief summary in lay terms, so not technical terms, but in lay terms, the difference your volunteer efforts have made. State accomplishments that we want to highlight. This also creates strong support of our programs as we tell our story. Conveys accomplishments in simple language that is free of technical jargon. So really kind of getting to the root of things. At the bottom of the performance measures progress summary section, so again, the last tab of your PPR for the summary/staff review, there's a performance measures progress summary section. You can enter additional comments in the overall sponsor note in that comment section. We are encouraging folks to include some impact statements in this section. So we can gauge that really sometimes from your progress that you've submitted in the performance measures. But sometimes it's nice to say this is the total impact that our project had. For example, our 10 RSVP volunteers tutored 20 third graders and have already committed 500 hours to our literacy program, ABC. So why is that important? Why is that? What impact is that having on their clients? So the clients have been served, and now because of that, those students are reading at a different grade level. They're, better aligned for success, or tying it back to your community needs statement. Because of this, we're meeting this community need as we identified. So these are things that we're looking for. We're looking to kind of take it just one step farther as we're looking at our PPRs. As all of you know or should know, we do monthly reports to Senior Corps headquarters as well, and we're always looking for things to highlight. And what we look for is really impact statements. And when I say an impact statement, it is basically a brief blurb demonstrating how your work is making a difference in your communities with your clients. And so it answers the questions, the so what and the who cares. And so we just want to make sure that folks are aware of impact statements. They're looking at them a little differently. There isn't any great resources out there that I have for you that's like, hey, this is a tutorial that you should work on or look at for impact statements. I'm sure I can find one if everybody wants them. But I just want folks to take a look at their progress reports and really look at it as the impact. So each of your work plans has a community need that you have told us is a need in your community. And so we want to make sure that we are working towards meeting those community needs. And so impact statements help us tell that story. And so I wanted just to take a few minutes for folks to think about that and think about how you can maybe rework the PPR, give us additional information or different information, or just make it kind of clear and concise about what you're doing. A great place to do that, again, is that overall sponsor note section. But I just wanted to make sure that folks are kind of taking a view of their PPR and making sure that you understand that we are utilizing them. We do look at them. We do gather data from them. And so making sure that you are truly trying to tell us the impact of your program as we start to talk about our programs to our quote unquote, you can't see my air quotes, but our quote unquote influentials. Impact statements are a great quick tool that we can rely on for that. So just wanted to make sure that folks are aware of this. This really completes my presentation, but I am going to open the lines and the chat function up for any questions that folks have. I have a few more slides, but they don't have anything in particular to do with the PPR. So I just wanted to see if anyone has any questions so far before I move on to kind of what our next CSO chat will be. So any questions so far?
Jancy?
Yes.
I do.
Hi, Sheila.
Surprise. What I have actually two, but one goes back to the impact statements.
Yes, ma'am.
It still has to, our impacts, our outcomes still have to be documented as to where we got it. I mean, we can't just say that, well, we worked with 200 children in helping them improve their reading skills, and they really liked us a lot.
Right.
It has to be documented what difference that made.
Right. And if you say they really liked us a lot, how do you know they really liked you a lot? Was there a survey? Yeah. So that information needs to be documented. And you might not necessarily say, we did this survey. I mean, that's helpful to know. But making sure that those surveys, those tools that you're using do exist. So yeah, everything that you present to us we do want to have some documentation for it. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. And identify the documentation on the...
Yep.
Yeah. Then I have another question, but it doesn't have to do with today's presentation, so I can wait.
Okay. Is that an offline conversation you want to have?
No, it would be something everybody'd be interested in.
Okay. Well, let me get through these next two things, and then I will open that up for you I'll come back to you, okay, Sheila?
That sounds good. Thank
you. All right. So our next CSO, so CSO stands for Corporation State Office. Our next CSO chat is going to be March 13th. So we are doing these CSO chats every other month. And so we will skip February and we will do March. Again, they're always on a Monday at 2 p.m. Central Time. And our topic is going to be theory of change and evidence-based programming. We're going to do a quick overview. This presentation I have presented at our regional conference last year. It's going to be tweaked a little bit to kind of fit into an hour, but this is going to be a presentation just explaining what theory of change is and what CNCS means by evidence-based programming. It's just a high-level overview of things. So again, that's going to be March 13th at 2 p.m. I will send out reminders. It should be on I sent out an Outlook calendar a while ago, but I will update those. I do want to point out that the CSO chats, these are things specifically for our Iowa programs. I do not want you to confuse them with the Senior Corps Headquarters Tuesday Talks. They typically fall on the same week, but that is something our new training coordinator, Brian Cognito, has set up for 2017. He set them up about the same time I set up our CSO chats. So the Senior Corps Tuesday Talks, those are all done by Senior Corps Headquarters, and those are specific. You'll get information from the listserv on those, and I normally try to send out information as well just to remind folks about those. So I just wanted to make sure that folks were aware that there are two different things that go on, and so I wanted to make sure that people weren't confused. The next slide really talks about more information. I hope you all know that the Corporation State Office, or the Iowa State Office, can be reached at ia@cns.gov. That is our general email inbox. It actually goes to Vicki and I both. If you do have any questions, I do encourage you, however, your first point of contact should always be your program officer. And then our general line is 515-284-4816. Just two additional resources on here for you. Again, that Managing Senior Corps Programs landing page. I'm going to promote that all day and all night. And then there is a Senior Corps training calendar. This is a training calendar that headquarters has put together. And so I wanted to make sure that folks were aware and paying attention to that calendar, as it does provide some great upcoming trainings for folks to listen to. So just wanted to make sure that folks were aware of that. Again, this session is being recorded. You can come back and listen to it. The PowerPoint I am going to send out once I get the recording done. I'll send it all out in one big email to everyone. So I want to thank everyone for listening today. I will open it up for questions, and first I will turn it back over to Sheila for her question.
Okay, thank you. Vicki sent us an email last Friday, and it had several things in it. The one thing that I'm asking about now, it says new online introductory course. And is this the new course that we would do now? We've completed one. So is this the new course for the National Criminal History Check requirements?
Sheila, I don't believe that one has been updated for 2017 yet. I think that what she sent was a request for folks to send in their certification that they had completed it for 2016, and that was the link for 2016. For 2017, I believe it will be very similar, but it won't be due until your current, I think for you in particular, you did it in April of 2016, and so your certification will say it expires in April of 2017. It won't be due until then. I will ask the question. They have not told us if that training is going to be different for 2017, but that link that she sent that says new, that was the 2016 link. So.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, I know it said 2016, but the only thing when she sent this, we had already had to have done it.
Yes.
So I thought, well, maybe this is the new one.
Yeah, she asked, I think that the intent of the email was to ask for the certification to be sent in to us for proof that they did it. They now are asking us to check it, which they weren't since April. So, and as I said to you guys before, I was like, hey, just keep it on file. And then I think last week she got notification that they wanted us to start tracking it after the fact, which is always fun. So that's what that was for. So I apologize for the confusion on that. But I will check about the 2017 CHC training, and if that will be different. So I will confirm that, Sheila.
Yeah, thank you. But bear in mind, it's not that I'm in a hurry to do it.
I mean, I know you're so intrigued with CHC. So, Cliff,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Cliff asked a question regarding the certificate. I have mine completed and on file here from my previous position. Do I need to redo and certify with the United Ways of Iowa? Cliff, that is a great question. I will seek clarification on that one. I'm going to ask Vicky. I'll be honest. I don't know the answer to that, but I will seek some clarification on that for you. I apologize. I don't know the answer. I'm going to assume that you will need to redo it under the United Ways of Iowa, but I'm going to confirm that. So just to be clear. Any other questions from folks about the progress report and the progress report supplement, not progress report supplement, I'm not talking about that, the progress report light or the progress report annual? Any questions folks have regarding the PPR? I will send additional reminders to everyone, but just wanted to make sure that folks are aware that the progress report light, for those who have 7-1 grant starts, that first 6 months ended on December 31st, and the progress report light will be due on January 29th, so at the end of this month. So there are a few programs that do not have 7-1 starts, and so your PPR due dates are a little different, so please check eGrants for the PPR due dates. But for the vast majority of folks, you're going to have a light coming up. Wow, I'm getting really confused for some reason on those two. So I apologize. Any final questions before we end today's call?
Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes today's CSO chat on the progress reports. I want to thank everyone for your time today. We will end the call. If you do have questions, please contact your designated program officer. We thank you for your time and enjoy your afternoon. Thanks so much.